When a quiet woman is humiliated and kicked out of first class, the airline staff has no idea they've just crossed paths with the one person who could dismantle their entire operation, her billionaire husband. The bustling airport was alive with the hum of travelers rushing to their gates. Among them stood Sarah Thompson, a simple woman in her mid-30s, dressed modestly in jeans and a light sweater. She carried herself with quiet confidence, though she preferred blending into the crowd rather than standing out. Today, however, fate seemed determined to make her presence known. Sarah had booked a first-class ticket for her flight home after visiting family across the country. It wasn't often that she indulged in such luxury, but this time, it felt like a small reward for months of hard work. As she approached the gate, clutching her boarding pass, Sarah noticed the usual flurry of activity around first-class passengers, attendants offering smiles and assistance, while others shuffled through security checks. Everything appeared normal until an airline employee approached her with a clipboard and an apologetic expression. "Miss Thompson," he began hesitantly, "we're experiencing some overbooking issues, and unfortunately, your seat has been reassigned to economy." Sarah blinked in disbelief. Overbooked? That didn't happen often in first class. Before she could protest, another staff member chimed in, explaining that they would offer her a voucher as compensation. But Sarah wasn't interested in vouchers or apologies. She wanted answers. Why was she being singled out when there were other passengers who hadn't even boarded yet? Her polite inquiries quickly escalated into frustration as the employees avoided eye contact and offered vague excuses. The situation quickly spiraled from a minor inconvenience into a full-blown confrontation. Sarah's initial confusion turned to frustration as the gate agent's explanations became increasingly dismissive and vague. When one of them muttered under their breath about her not fitting the profile of a typical first-class passenger, it struck a nerve. Sarah froze mid-sentence, her face flushing with embarrassment and anger. Was this really about logistics, or was it something more insidious? An assumption based on how she looked. She pressed for clarity, demanding answers, but instead of addressing her concerns, the staff grew more evasive. Their body language shifted. They avoided eye contact, shuffled papers unnecessarily, and exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly hoping she'd simply give up and leave. But Sarah wasn't the type to back down easily. Her polite demeanor gave way to firmness as she insisted on speaking to a supervisor. This request only seemed to escalate the tension. The supervisor arrived reluctantly, his expression already defensive before he even spoke. He reiterated the same rehearsed lines about overbooking and operational needs, refusing to acknowledge the deeper issue at play. His tone carried an undertone of condescension, as if implying that someone like *** should feel grateful just to be flying at all. For Sarah, this wasn't about pride or entitlement. It was about fairness. She had followed every rule, paid for her ticket, and yet here she was being treated as though she didn't belong. As the argument dragged on, other passengers began to take notice. Some watched sympathetically, nodding along as Sarah made valid points about customer service and respect. Others rolled their eyes or whispered among themselves, assuming she was making a fuss purely out of ego. The judgmental stares added another layer of humiliation to an already demeaning experience. Yet Sarah refused to let their opinions sway her. What mattered most was standing up for herself, not because she wanted special treatment, but because she deserved basic decency. Still, the emotional toll was evident in her voice, which grew quieter yet firmer with each passing minute. Eventually, realizing there was no resolution in sight, Sarah accepted the transfer to economy class, not out of defeat, but out of sheer exhaustion. As she walked away from the gate, dragging her carry-on behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling of injustice. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she would do next. Little did the airline staff know, their actions had set off a chain reaction that would soon expose not only their own biases, but also the immense power dynamics at play. Unbeknownst to them, Sarah's billionaire husband owned the very airline they worked for, and he wouldn't take kindly to seeing his wife treated so poorly. For now, though, Sarah kept her composure, silently vowing to address the matter once she reached her destination. When Sarah finally disembarked from the flight, having endured the cramped discomfort of economy class after being unceremoniously removed from first class, she was simmering with a mix of emotions: anger, humiliation, and disbelief. It wasn't just the physical downgrade that bothered her. It was the blatant disregard for her dignity as a paying customer. She had done nothing wrong, yet she'd been treated like an inconvenience, a problem to be shuffled aside without explanation or apology. As soon as she stepped off the plane, still clutching her carry-on bag tightly, she pulled out her phone and dialed her husband, Michael Thompson. Michael, one of the wealthiest men in the world and the owner of the airline, answered on the second ring. His deep, calm voice immediately put Sarah at ease, but his tone shifted when he heard the tremor in hers. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern evident even over the phone line. Sarah took a deep breath before recounting the events of the day. The dismissive remarks, the refusal to listen to her concerns, the thinly veiled judgment about her appearance, and the ultimate indignity of being forced into economy despite holding a valid first-class ticket. Her voice cracked slightly as she described how the staff had spoken to her, not as a valued passenger but as someone who didn't belong. By the time she finished, Michael was silent for a moment, a rarity for him. When he spoke again, his words were measured, but there was steel beneath them. "I'm going to handle this," he said firmly. "No one treats my wife, or any passenger, like that." The next morning, Michael made arrangements to accompany Sarah back to the same airport where the incident had occurred. He dressed casually, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, intentionally avoiding anything flashy that might draw attention. To anyone watching, they appeared to be an ordinary couple traveling together. But inside, Michael was seething, not so much at the personal insult to Sarah, though that certainly fueled his anger, but at the systemic failure within his own company. If employees could treat someone like Sarah, a woman who carried herself with grace and humility, so poorly, then what did that say about the culture of his airline? For Michael, this wasn't just a personal matter. It was a wake-up call. As they approached the check-in counter, Sarah led the way, while Michael hung back slightly, observing quietly. At first, everything seemed routine. The agent greeted them politely, scanning Sarah's boarding pass and confirming their seats. Then Sarah calmly requested to speak to a manager, citing the previous day's incident. Almost instantly, the atmosphere shifted. The agent recognized Sarah from the day before and visibly tensed. Another staff member nearby leaned in, whispering urgently to the agent, clearly aware of the brewing situation. Within moments, a supervisor arrived, flustered and apologetic, offering platitudes about how sorry they were for any inconvenience. But Sarah cut him off mid-sentence. "This isn't about inconvenience," she said sharply. "It's about respect." And I didn't get any. At this point, Michael stepped forward. Up until now, he had remained in the background, letting Sarah take the lead. But as soon as he moved closer, the energy in the room changed. Though he hadn't introduced himself yet, something about his presence commanded attention. The supervisor faltered mid-apology, his eyes darting between Michael and Sarah, sensing that the stakes had suddenly risen. Michael smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice low but carrying authority. The supervisor hesitated, shaking his head nervously. Michael continued, "My name is Michael Thompson. I own this airline." The effect was immediate. Gasps rippled through the small group of employees surrounding them. Faces paled, and hands flew to mouths in shock. One of the agents who had been involved in kicking Sarah out of first class looked like they might faint. The supervisor stammered, trying to form coherent sentences, but Michael held up a hand to silence him. "Let me make one thing very clear," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Every single person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look, what they wear, or which seat they've booked. My wife paid for a first-class ticket, followed all the rules, and was treated like she didn't belong here. That is unacceptable." He went on to explain that this wasn't just about Sarah. It was about accountability. How many other passengers had been subjected to similar treatment? How many complaints had gone ignored because the company prioritized appearances over ethics? Michael's words carried weight not only because of his position, but also because of his reputation. Known for his fairness and integrity, he had built his empire on the principles of hard work and respect for others. Seeing those values trampled by his own employees was unforgivable. After delivering his speech, Michael instructed the supervisor to gather everyone involved in the incident for an impromptu meeting. Word spread quickly throughout the terminal, and soon, a crowd of curious onlookers gathered, eager to witness the fallout. Some whispered excitedly, recognizing Michael's name and connecting the dots. Others simply watched in awe as the billionaire calmly dismantled the excuses offered by his own staff. Each employee involved was given a chance to explain themselves, but none of their explanations held water. They talked about overbooking policies, operational challenges, and profiles of typical first-class passengers, all buzzwords designed to deflect responsibility. Michael listened patiently, nodding occasionally, but his expression never softened. When they finished, he responded with a single sentence: "Policies exist to serve people, not to dehumanize them." By the end of the encounter, it was clear that heads would roll. Michael ordered a full investigation into the incident, promising transparency and accountability. He also announced sweeping changes to the airline's training programs, focusing on customer service, inclusivity, and empathy. Any employee found guilty of discriminatory behavior would face immediate disciplinary action, up to and including termination. These measures weren't just for show. They were meant to send a message, both internally and externally, that such treatment would not be tolerated under any circumstances. For Sarah, watching her husband take charge was both cathartic and humbling. On one hand, she felt vindicated, knowing that justice would be served. On the other hand, she couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation. None of this should have required Michael's intervention. She shouldn't have needed to invoke her husband's wealth and power to receive basic respect. Yet here they were, proving once again that privilege often speaks louder than principle. Still, Sarah chose to focus on the positive outcome. Thanks to Michael's actions, real change would come, not just for her, but for countless other passengers who might otherwise have suffered in silence. Later that evening, as they sat together in their private jet en route to their next destination, Sarah leaned her head on Michael's shoulder, sighing deeply. "You know," she said softly, "I don't need a fancy seat to feel important. I just want to be treated like a human being." Michael kissed her forehead, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And that's exactly what everyone deserves," he replied. In that moment, they both understood that the true measure of success wasn't wealth or power, it was character. And by standing up for what was right, they had proven that theirs was unshakable. The revelation of Michael's identity had shocked not only the airline staff, but also the public. News of the incident spread rapidly, sparking conversations about classism, bias, and corporate accountability. While some criticized Sarah for relying on her husband's influence, others praised her for speaking out and holding the airline accountable. Regardless of the opinions swirling around them, one thing was certain. The story of the simple woman kicked out of first class and the billionaire husband who owned the airline would go down in history as a powerful reminder that respect knows no price tag. The aftermath of the incident at the airport sent ripples through every level of Michael Thompson's airline, from frontline staff to senior executives. It wasn't just a single event that could be swept under the rug. It was a wake-up call for an entire organization. In the days following Sarah's confrontation with the gate agents and Michael's intervention, the airline launched a comprehensive investigation into the circumstances surrounding the incident. Every employee involved, from the initial gate agent who muttered about profiles to the supervisor who failed to address Sarah's concerns, was questioned thoroughly. The findings revealed a troubling pattern of behavior among some employees, rooted in implicit bias and outdated assumptions about what a first-class passenger should look like. This revelation shocked even those within the company who prided themselves on their commitment to excellence. Michael wasted no time implementing sweeping changes to ensure such incidents would never happen again. He called an emergency meeting with his executive team, where he delivered a stern directive. We are not just in the business of flying people from one place to another. We are in the business of treating them with dignity, respect, and care. Under his leadership, the airline introduced mandatory training programs focused on customer service, inclusivity, and unconscious bias. These weren't superficial workshops designed to check boxes. They were rigorous courses led by experts in psychology, sociology, and human resources. Employees were required to participate in role-playing exercises, empathy-building activities, and discussions about how biases can affect decision-making. Failure to complete the program resulted in suspension or termination. In addition to training, Michael announced structural reforms within the company. A new division was created specifically to handle complaints related to discrimination or mistreatment. This division operated independently of other departments, ensuring that passengers' voices would always be heard without fear of retaliation or dismissal. Furthermore, Michael instituted a policy requiring all managers and supervisors to personally review any escalated customer complaints, holding them accountable for resolving issues fairly and promptly. To reinforce these measures, the airline also implemented anonymous reporting systems, allowing employees to flag inappropriate behavior without fear of retribution. These steps signaled a clear shift in priorities. Profit margins and operational efficiency would no longer come at the expense of humanity. The public response to the incident was mixed, but ultimately positive. News outlets around the world covered the story extensively, framing it as both a cautionary tale and a triumph of accountability. Social media buzzed with debates about classism, privilege, and corporate responsibility. Some critics argued that Sarah's reliance on her husband's wealth undermined the broader message of equality and fairness. They pointed out that most passengers wouldn't have had access to the same level of recourse if they found themselves in a similar situation. Others, however, praised Sarah for using her platform to shine a light on systemic issues within the travel industry. Many saw her as a symbol of resilience, a woman who refused to let injustice slide, even when it came at great personal cost. For Sarah herself, the experience was transformative. While she appreciated the vindication and the changes being made within the airline, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. The incident served as a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained societal biases could be, even in industries that claimed to value diversity and inclusion. She often reflected on the irony of the situation. Despite living a life of relative privilege as the wife of a billionaire, she still faced judgment based on appearances. Yet, rather than letting bitterness take root, Sarah chose to channel her emotions into action. She began working closely with advocacy groups focused on combating classism and promoting equitable treatment in public spaces. Her goal was to amplify the voices of those who didn't have the resources or connections to fight back when wronged. Michael, too, underwent a period of reflection. As someone who had built his empire on principles of fairness and hard work, he was deeply troubled by the realization that his own company had fallen short of those ideals. He spent hours poring over internal reports, scrutinizing hiring practices, and reviewing customer feedback. What he discovered was sobering. While the airline excelled in areas like punctuality and safety, it lagged behind in fostering a culture of empathy and respect. Determined to rectify this, Michael became more hands-on in overseeing day-to-day operations, making surprise visits to airports, and engaging directly with employees and passengers alike. His presence alone sent a powerful message that leadership meant accountability, not detachment. As weeks turned into months, the impact of the changes became evident. Passengers reported feeling more valued and respected during their interactions with airline staff. Complaints about discriminatory behavior plummeted, and customer satisfaction scores reached record highs. Internally, morale improved as employees embraced the renewed emphasis on kindness and professionalism. Many staff members expressed gratitude for the training programs, saying they felt better equipped to navigate challenging situations with compassion and understanding. For the first time in years, the airline truly embodied its slogan, "Where every journey begins with respect." Sarah and Michael's relationship grew stronger through the ordeal. Though they had always shared a deep bond, the incident brought them closer together, united by a shared mission to create meaningful change. They spent evenings discussing strategies for improving workplace culture, brainstorming ways to extend their influence beyond the airline industry. Sarah encouraged Michael to use his platform to advocate for broader social reforms, emphasizing the importance of leading by example. Inspired by her passion, Michael founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting inclusivity and equity in transportation and hospitality sectors. Together, they traveled the world, speaking at conferences and meeting with leaders in various industries to share their insights and inspire action. Looking back on the events that unfolded, Sarah often thought about the power of vulnerability. By standing up for herself, even when it meant exposing her pain, she had sparked a movement that transcended her personal experience. She realized that true strength wasn't about hiding your flaws or pretending everything was fine. It was about embracing your humanity and using it to make the world a better place. Similarly, Michael learned that success wasn't measured solely by financial achievements or market dominance. True success lay in creating environments where everyone, regardless of background or status, felt seen, heard, and valued. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their penthouse overlooking the city lights, Sarah turned to Michael with a thoughtful smile. "You know," she said, "this whole thing taught me something important. No matter how much money or power we have, none of it matters unless we use it to lift others up." Michael nodded, taking her hand in his. "And that's exactly what we're going to keep doing," he replied. Their journey was far from over, but they knew they were on the right path. A path defined not by titles or possessions, but by character, compassion, and a relentless pursuit of justice. In the end, the story of the simple woman kicked out of first class and the billionaire husband who owned the airline became more than just a headline-grabbing anecdote. It became a testament to the enduring power of integrity, humility, and love. It reminded people that while wealth and influence could open doors, it was the choices made behind those doors that truly defined a person's legacy. And for Sarah and Michael, their legacy would forever be tied to the belief that everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.